So as we listen to these teachings, then we, you and I, should do so with a noble mind, a noble mind, that is to say, a mind that's very relaxed and very open and spacious, a mind that is driven or propelled by the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And a commitment or intention to apply the teachings by learning the teachings, studying the teachings on bodhicitta, and reflecting again and again on all the different topics involved with training the mind in bodhicitta, and then committing yourself and to apply those teachings. In order to fulfill your aspirations, in order to benefit sentient beings. Okay, so then, with that, we are in the 5th chapter of the 10 chapters of Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, entering into the conduct of the Bodhisattva. The general pattern or the general layout of the book is a commentary on the entire path of the Bodhisattva, in particular the 6 paramitas. And that is all the underpinning of all of that, of all of these teachings is bodhicitta, both that bodhicitta in aspiration, bodhicitta in action, engaging bodhicitta, and culminating in absolute bodhicitta. So sometimes we can think of bodhicitta as threefold bodhicitta, engaging bodhicitta, aspiration bodhicitta, engaging bodhicitta, and absolute bodhicitta. Sometimes we, as beginners, we train on, of course, the single training in Mahayana Dharma is bodhicitta. What's complex is our mind, the configuration of our habitual tendencies, our afflictions, emotional, mental afflictions, and our karma. So we may think sometimes that the Dharma is kind of overwhelming. All these different topics, all these different things to know, all these different categories and so forth. But that's all that. All of that is nothing compared to our own the complexity and disarray of our own mind. And so in following the one single path of bodhicitta, then there are many different, then there unfolds many different methods to apply to the different degrees of capacity we have based on our limitations. The Dharma is unlimited and we have limitations. So understanding that, then sometimes we practice much more aspiration bodhicitta. Sometimes we can have an opportunity and ability to practice this engaging bodhicitta. We can carry that aspiration into conduct. And sometimes we can also capture this absolute bodhicitta, even if it just takes the form of kind of an atmosphere of how we do anything. This illusory quality. So right now we have been going over these absolutely essential key points of heedfulness, mindfulness, and introspection. And these three faculties, these three abilities are unique to human beings, that we have this ability to be introspective and to not just think, but also to know that we're thinking and to think about thinking, to think about our thoughts, to think about our emotions. And so Shantideva's teachings here on these three chapters, which are the teachings on the paramita of discipline, the second paramita of the second transcendent conduct of the Bodhisattva is discipline. And here he's not necessarily going over all the different rules and regulations of discipline, but teaching how to practice discipline, the key points. If we just burden ourselves with restrictions and expectations of our conduct, then we'll just exhaust ourselves, or we'll just be putting ourselves in a straitjacket for no purpose. So what he's teaching is how to practice discipline. What we need to do kind of inside, how our mind should engage with discipline. And of course, the single, just to essentialize the discipline of that we're talking about, it is the discipline of bodhicitta, to always give rise and maintain the intention to attain a state of perfect awakening out of compassion for all sentient beings. And to carry that intention out through the practice of the paramitas, the transcendent ways of conduct. And since we are beginners, then we have these 3 chapters that of mind training that prevents that bodhicitta from becoming lost, forgotten. And there's a reason why it's forgotten. So what the intent, what in the 4th and 5th chapter are, it's giving us all those factors that prevent our maintaining bodhicitta. We can have that motivation, 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and we can lose it. We get distracted, we get upset, we get driven by something. And that's something that upsets us, that's something that distracts us, that's something that replaces this pure bodhicitta motivation, are what Shantideva is defining and pointing to as the target of our introspection and the target of our mindfulness, the target of our heedfulness. It's what we can sum up to be afflictions. So it's not productive to just always be banging our heads against the wall, trying to have a good motivation without looking introspectively to see what is it that's undermining our motivation. It's fine to constantly be remembered about motivation and be able to give rise to it, but it's really just a struggle. And so all of these different steps that he is very clearly presenting here, that he's presenting here, that the commentary clarifies, then that is how we strengthen our ability to not allow ourselves to lose our motivation. So even though we, like in the 1st chapter, we love bodhicitta, we get a passion for bodhicitta, but then the real work here takes place not by just practicing bodhicitta as such, but that our bodhicitta practice takes the form of basically focusing on our afflictions and remediating, using our remedial mind to antidote our afflicted mind. If the real goal is this prajna, is the wisdom. And wisdom, the kind of wisdom that is the goal, is our natural way of abiding, our naturally occurring wisdom that is now obscured by our afflictions. Okay, so I'll move into the text now. We've been discussing up to now the discipline of avoiding negative actions. Again, how to avoid negative actions through carefulness, introspection, and mindfulness. Not how to avoid negative actions by strapping on a straitjacket, by moralistic methods. Discipline here means introspection, mindfulness. So discipline, there's the discipline of avoiding negative actions, the discipline of training or performing virtuous actions, and then thirdly are the training and the discipline of conduct that benefits sentient beings, that benefits others. And so we are on the 71st chapter, 71st verse of this 5th chapter. It also occurs on the 71st page, page 71, verse 71. And so these 10 are from here to 71 to 83. And my intention is to go through these verses up to 83. This is the discipline of how to become skilled in practicing virtue, how to becoming skilled in practicing Dharma, becoming skilled in practicing Bodhisattva conduct. So he says, be the master of yourself and have an ever-smiling countenance. Rid yourself of scowling, wrathful frowns and be a true and honest friend to all. So this first line points to, again, to the supremacy of mind, that body and speech must come under mind's influence, mind's power, not the other way around. One of the characteristics that distinguish Buddhism from some other spiritual practices is that the mind is the path that affects the body and the speech, not the other way around. And then bringing body and speech under the power of mind, okay, then that mind also has there's another power struggle, okay, regarding our mind, and that is that one part of our mind is that aspect which is to be overcome, and the other aspect is that mindset that is the remedial measures that overcome that. Basically, what's to be overcome is our non-virtuous mindset, negative mindset, and what is to the remedial mind is that which is our virtuous mindset, and training more and more on the virtuous side as an antidote to the negative aspects of mind that have become very entrenched and habitual, so basically we don't even know that it's only when we start to antidote negative actions that we even begin to realize that our mind is dominated by negativity. It resists being converted to virtue, sets up all sorts of roadblocks, plays all sorts of games to resist being virtuous. And so here he says, be the master of yourself and let your virtuous mind sort of reflect in your countenance, your face, your says have an ever smiling countenance. So our rid yourself of scowling, wrathful frowns. So don't try to when you recognize that you're face is conveying your kleshas, then let that be an incentive or a direction to go where you recognize your mind's kleshas and then antidote them. Be reliable, be a reliable helper, be a reliable teacher, be a reliable guide, and promote harmony. Don't speak, be honest. Don't speak with deception, or don't be pretentious in your speech, and avoid lying. And truth on the bodhisattva conduct, then we need to handle truth very skillfully in our speech. It shouldn't be divisive or speech that upsets or angers people, that inflames the kleshas of listeners. Then do not, acting inconsiderately, move chairs and furniture so noisily around. Likewise, do not open doors with violence. Take pleasure in the practice of humility. So here, this is again, as in the previous chapter on being careful. Should be careful with objects. Treat, like it says in the commentary, we should treat objects, material objects, we should treat them as if they were people, as if they were living things, as if they were things that we also, or alternatively, treat things as though everything that we own, we've borrowed from someone else, and we're just using it. So then we maintain it, treat it well, but don't have so much attachment to it when we think that way. I know I always noticed how Chakta Rinpoche handled things. A bell, dorje, a hammer, a pen or a pencil, moving tables or pulling things towards them. I always noticed how it almost seemed like he was handling a living thing. Always, almost every time I think of that, it really stirs me. There's also, as we read in some texts about the 6 realms of existence, that sometimes, here it reminds me, here at doors, there are sometimes there are beings, consciousnesses that take birth, and even though it falls into the category of the sort of neighboring hells or the different hell realms, but they take birth in inanimate objects like doors, and every time a door is slammed, they feel intense suffering. That's why we shouldn't be like hitting sticks, hitting trees with sticks, or just absent-mindedly throwing stones. You know, there could be sentient beings that actually did take rebirth in an inanimate object. Even some people, where if you worship things like mountains and trees and rocks, you know, you see in some cultures, particularly in India, it's a very strong. People take a rock and then they worship and make offerings and so forth. They develop a great attachment to that inanimate object. And then at rebirth, when the time of rebirth comes, they can very easily slip into merging with that rock or tree. So we should always be very careful in that way. Okay. Then see all these points here that are being brought out are to ways of staying aware of our flaws, staying aware of our faults, which also then will direct us to our kleshas, our afflictions. So then herons, cats, and burglars achieve what they intend by going silently and unobserved. Such is the constant practice of a sage. Okay. Well, this last line here, take pleasure. Here it's in verse 72. Take pleasure in the practice of humility. Like that sort of sums up the above. Don't just bang around, self-absorbed, self-centered, but practice of humility. Don't be pretentious. Even our intentions to practice or for dharma ways, like it's always a little scary when people. To me, I always feel a little scared when people sort of broadcast or announce that they're going to do a retreat for such and such a amount of time. That kind of speech, that kind of kind of pretension creates obstacles. It attracts obstacles. It increases arrogance, and it also exhausts in some measure one's previous merit, and very oftentimes then it sort of undermines your ability to do a retreat in that manner. So keep a low profile, antidote pride, become don't make your practice obvious. Remember in the 7-point mind training, it's not a slogan, but in the commentary, it says, practice mind training, practice bodhicitta in such a way that other people when they see you, will think that you're really not much of a practitioner at all. So kind of strive in your humility to be like that. Pride is really the enemy, or the enemy, the obstacle to moving forward in Dharma practice. And we have to be particularly aware of that when we make statements like, I will attain enlightenment in order to bring all beings to a state of completely perfect awakening. On the one hand, we can't overestimate our capacity. On the other hand, we shouldn't for a moment think that you're saying something that's impossible. Both forms of pride we should avoid and rely on our heart, our loving kindness and compassion. That's why we make these kinds of aspirations. That aspiration to attain awakening is not separate. It's not detached from compassion. Parents, cats, and burglars, who are kind of known as not peaceful beings, achieve what they intend, which is kind of a small purpose. A fish, a mouse, some cash, by going silently and unobserved. So they get what they want through these, by being very quiet. So we also should go about our discipline and with carefulness and kind-heartedness in a similar way, for what actually is a much greater purpose, a purpose that goes beyond, it's the twofold purpose. Our practice is to accomplish a twofold purpose, which is our own liberation and the liberation of all beings. There's a crow and the cat. The crow and the cat. That it's not a parable. It's a story of the crow and the cat. The crow and the cat are. The crow is making a big deal. Like I can fly. I have very powerful wings. I have very powerful beak, very sharp beak. I have claws. I have claws. Yeah, claws. And I can fly and swoop, and I make a very loud cawing noise. And so the crow sort of fancies itself on being a great hunter because of that, and sort of boasts to the cat that, and they enter into a contest, and the crow flaps its wings, caws, swoops, and of course the mouse is completely alarmed and runs off, where the cat just sort of very slowly and carefully and methodically and unnoticeably comes up and catches the mouse. So that idea, translate that in how we practice bodhicitta. The intention, or the practice of bodhicitta, the target of bodhicitta is self-clinging. So it's never appropriate if the target of our practice is self-clinging, which leaves its sort of footprint as self-cherishing, self-centeredness, conceit, arrogance, then if we want to practice bodhicitta, then we need to interrupt the continuity of all those marks and characteristics of self-clinging. So undergo the austerity of being humble. When useful admonitions come unsought from those with skill in counseling their fellows, welcome them with humble gratitude and always strive to learn from everyone. Okay, so now we're shifting to this area having to do with how we should see others, how we should see everything as instructive or as our teachers. So when someone criticizes us directly or says things like, you shouldn't do that, whether they're coming from a very sort of whether they're sort of respected friends or whether they're just complete fools, we should accept that and welcome that and regard them as teachers, be a disciple of them in that instance, and accept that advice with gratitude, with respect, with equanimity. Maybe others see something that I'm missing. And welcome them with humble gratitude and always strive to learn from everyone. Even if someone is saying something that is non-dharmic, that is maybe even anti-dharmic, still this applies. That regard them as a teacher, have respect and kindness and humility when they admonish us. We don't have to follow what they say if it's not in accord with the principles of Dharma. But our mind training is that we have respect and gratitude for everyone. Most people hate getting unsolicited, unasked for advice. In Bodhisattva training, when we get unsolicited advice, the training is to rejoice in that. And if it's contrary to the Dharma, just don't follow it. That's how it's taught. There's one quote that says, "All for the Bodhisattva, all phenomena and existence are my teachers," someone said. So in this regard also, then we should, the commentary goes on to make mention of how we also, from our side, from the trainee side, should be very skillful about relating to speaking with others and somehow move others towards virtue with in accord with one's. Of course, we can only do that we can only really admonish others to virtue and teach others when, in accordance with our own conviction. In other words, it's taught that our ability to benefit others in teaching Dharma is in relation to our own developed conviction, our own conviction based on our own experience. As it said, liberate your own mind with wisdom and liberate the minds of others with compassion. To teach without that conviction is useless, or sometimes even harmful, or it can be harmful. Then verse 75, praise all whose speech is worthy, means all who's speaking truthfully. Say, your words are excellent. Your words are very beneficial, so be grateful, again, in this manner. And when you notice that others are acting well, encourage them in terms of warm approval. So carrying out this same theme. We should respond when we see something, if it's appropriate. We say sometimes thank you a lot. If we see someone doing something that's very kind or beneficial or virtuous towards someone else or towards a person or an animal, or if they pick up litter and things like that, then if we're close there, we say, "Oh, thank you for that," or "Very nice." It's good for our speech, and it encourages others. And if, again, this is part of always to do with your ability to construe what is skillful. If they don't like to be praised, if you feel that someone doesn't like to be praised, then the next verse says, extol their qualities discreetly. It's not good. It's not, what do I say? It's not good. Don't flatter people. That's the idea a little. That's kind of the flavor of this one. It's not good to flatter people, and that if you come across as a flatterer, And that's not in keeping either with the intention here. Yeah. Alto Rinpoche, he was giving the teaching to a group over many, many days. And I think some new person maybe came or something, and or he got someone sent him a note who was at the teachings, saying how amazing the teachings were, and praising him for his ability to draw out the intention of the text that he was teaching from. And he didn't show up for weeks after that. It upset him so much, and he said he was really working on his pride and so forth, to overcome any negative associations that arise from being praised. Okay, then when they're, let's see, extol their qualities discreetly. Okay, when they're praised by others, praise them too. Okay, so when you hear someone praising others, then even if they're your enemies or people you don't like, or if you don't think they even have those qualities, if that praise is baseless, then don't contradict the. It's not in keeping with the conduct to contradict and engage with that. The practice here, and this verse and the subsequent verses, is the practice of rejoicing. Even like how amazing it is that you can see qualities in that person that I can't see. So then rejoice in their ability to do that. And as it says, when the qualities they praise are yours, reflect upon their skill in recognizing qualities. So rejoice in their pure perception. In all cases, then this is guarding against pride, or very often when people praise other people, a lot of our irritation comes from sort of some hidden jealousy or envy. And so here, these two verses, this verse and this 77, are pointing out the practice of rejoicing. The goal of every act is happiness itself. So ordinary beings, all their actions are for some aspect of personal happiness. And for the Bodhisattva, all their actions are for the happiness of others. So the goal of every act is happiness, regardless. So though even with great wealth, it's rarely found. In other words, happiness basically you can't buy happiness. Happiness comes from virtue, and rejoicing is a great practice of virtue. To take your pleasure in the excellence of others. That's what it means. When others are happy, then rejoice in that. Whether it's worldly excellence or worldly success or Dharma erudition or Dharma accomplishments, then the practice is one of training your mind and rejoicing. That kind of virtue leads to your own qualities increasing, your own merit increasing. So let them, others, be a heartfelt joy to you. So this is the importance of rejoicing in these circumstances. Perhaps you wouldn't, it wouldn't have occurred to you to rejoice in these circumstances. So go over this and really try to reflect and absorb this so that you try it out and see how it works for you. And the next is, by acting thus in this life, you'll lose nothing. It's very rejoicing, aside from the great virtue that accrues in the mind of one who rejoices, it's very cheap. You don't really have to do anything except rejoice in others' good fortune or in others' qualities. It doesn't cost you anything. And as it says, in future lives, great bliss will come to you. So through virtue only increases your happiness. And by getting used to or getting accustomed to rejoicing, it becomes an easy access to merit, to virtue. There's a constant access to practicing virtue. You can do it when you can't do anything. You can rejoice in those who can do something. When we see suffering, the practice is compassion and fortifying your intention to free them from suffering. When you see happiness, then the practice is rejoicing. Wrongdoing brings not joy but pain. So, through bad intentions are like a poisonous weapon that it's aimed at yourself. There's no joy in that, and there's no joy in that bad intentions and wrongdoing that issues from bad intentions. And your own qualities diminish, your virtue and merit diminish, and your joy, you lose your joy. And then, as it says here, in the future, dreadful torment. So this practice of rejoicing, suffering and happiness, of compassion and rejoicing. That's the practice that's taught here as the conduct of a bodhisattva. And the next verse says, speak coherently, appropriately, clear in meaning, pleasantly, rid yourself of craving and aversion, speak gently with moderation. So this obviously, or of course, this is about speech. We should speak appropriately, meaning in accord with the mind of another, of the other, of the of your who you're having a conversation with. Try to, if you are having, depending on the kind of conversation you're having, if you want to lead someone to virtue, then begin by taking their point of view and speak in accord, not take their point of view, speak according to their point of view. And then you can lead them to virtue. But first you have to match, or you have to meet the other person. Make your mind, your speech clear in meaning, so that there's no room, you're not speaking and then allowing room for doubt. And pleasantly, even, of course, humor is a great instrument of propelling communication in a so rid yourself of craving and aversion. So in order to use your speaking as a skillful means for others, then we need to practice mindfulness and introspection in order to do that. Again, always being mindful and aware, alert to your mind as you speak, not abandon your mind and just speak out through your throat. Don't speak with just momentum, but always be aware of your intention. That's what it says. Rid yourself of craving and aversion. Speak gently with moderation, not too long. Don't just be mute, like obviously mute. And just these advice here of being moderate and not quick, not slow, and so forth. It talks in the commentary like that. So in speaking this way, then your mind, if you can practice this mindfulness and introspection and speak, then your mind becomes very focused, and it becomes very peaceful, so that it doesn't disturb others. That is the practice of the Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva shouldn't rouse people up and have them get angry and storm off, and then criticize the Dharma or criticize the Bodhisattvas, as it says in the first chapter. You don't want to act in such a way that others either criticize a Bodhisattva, which is, as the first chapter indicates, it's a very harmful to them from the karmic point of view, and it can cause people to reject the Dharma. It kind of influences their future. It can even close the door to liberation for them. So we have to be very cautious. Bodhisattvas have to be very skillful, which requires carefulness, mindfulness, and introspection. Okay, then the next verse, 80. When you look at others, the first last was when you speak to others. Now here we're looking at others. When you look at others, think that it will be through them that you will come to Buddhahood. So look on them with frank and loving hearts. So when you look on others, meaning friends or enemies or those that don't fall into either camp, think kindness, like look at them with kindness. And look at them as those who are your helpers, enemies, friends, those you're indifferent towards. Be indifferent because you maybe some don't have a strong feeling or karma or what have you, but they're still aids, they're still your helpers. Without sentient beings, there's no path. So at the outset, others, beings, are they are the object of compassion, to develop compassion. They allow compassion to rise in your mind. And they are the cause of compassion expanding and spreading in your mind. So we need sentient beings. Sentient beings are important to us. So we want to relate to sentient beings. We want to relate to others as beginners to give rise to compassion, which unfolds into this aspiration, bodhicitta. Then it also kind of stretches our mind beyond being self-centered, conceited, or self-centered. We always make ourselves the reference point for everything. But by relating to others and feeling and working with your mind and regarding others as participating in your spiritual development and are essential for your spiritual development, it reduces your own self-centeredness, your own self-referencing. If there's no beings, then there's no bodhicitta, because we need that compassionate component and that relationship, spacious, sentient beings fill space. So we need to grow that spaciousness. Here, then, it must be that we don't grow that spaciousness of mind by conceiving of, conceptualizing, thinking of empty space. We develop that spaciousness by thinking of sentient beings filling space. Wherever there's space, there's sentient beings. Even between you and a perceived sentient being, there are sentient beings. So working with sentient beings in this way, at the outset in our bodhicitta practice, is that we should think very kindly, and it's through friends, enemies, and those that we're indifferent towards, it's through them that we will come to Buddhahood. And then further, it's through sentient beings, due to sentient beings, that we are able to gather the two accumulations of merit and wisdom and practice the transcendent conduct of the Bodhisattva path, the 6 paramitas. If there's, how can we practice generosity without sentient beings? Sentient beings are the ground of our bodhicitta mind training. And then at the point of fruition, at the point of the fruition of the path, Buddhahood, then Buddhahood, all sentient beings are the field of the activities of the Buddha. So even at Buddhahood, from the beginning all the way to complete and perfect Buddhahood, sentient beings are important. And it's through sentient beings that we come to Buddhahood. When we do come to Buddhahood, then we act for the benefit of sentient beings directly. Whoever sees you, hears you, touches you, remembers you, then you are benefiting sentient beings. So that's how you should look at others. So when you are leaving your quarantine or your shelter, you're sheltering in place, you don't see people, we see less and less people. So when we see people and go out, it's very exciting almost these days. Now we're going back in again a little bit, it seems like. But when we do go out, then think that way. It's not that you're seeing sentient beings because you're lonely and it's so great to see somebody else. But on top of that, you're seeing sentient beings, and this is who you are practicing for. You're practicing on their behalf, and they are contributing to your practice in that fashion, in that way. So look on them with frank, meaning open, loving hearts, like a parent thinks of their only small infant, kind of a complete innocent infant. You can just completely unleash a love there. There's no, they haven't done anything to you yet. They haven't talked back, or they haven't, done anything to taint you. So just like, think of all sentient beings like a mother or a father sees an infant, a young child, with loving kindness. This kind of loving kindness in your heart, and have that be what expresses itself in your speech and in your look, how you look, like that. Not how you look, but how you your view. When it says, when you look at others, like that look, have it come from this kind heart, and then your actions also should be an extension. It shouldn't be disconnected from your loving kindness. Okay, then always fired by highest aspirations, always fired by highest aspiration, laboring to implement the antidotes, you will reap great virtue in the field of excellence and in the fields of benefits and sorrow. Okay. Fired by so laboring to implement the antidotes. I mean, that is what's being discussed here, is recognizing the target and then employing the antidote, the remedy. It's like this two minds we have, like they said at the beginning. We have the afflicted mind, and then we have, through the blessings of the three jewels, we have the remedial mind. And it's a big contest that we are going to win. That's our aspiration, to defeat our afflictions. But in order to do that, we need to know how to practice. We need to know what the key points of practice are, is or are. If we just learn Dharma or hear teachings, but miss what the key point is, then our practice won't be so effective, and we can then become what could be called spiritually discouraged. We reach a state of spiritual discouragement, doing practice and so forth. But so we need to know the key points of the practice. Even practicing virtue, speaking truthfully. How do we do that? What's the key point? We can know that speaking truthfully and avoiding and speaking meaningfully and giving up gossiping and giving up deception and divisiveness and all these other non-virtuous, unvirtuous action. But we need to know the key points, like that's what Shantideva is expressing here, is how to practice that. And then here, to implement the antidotes, in this case, then there are 4 key points that will fire your practice, that will fire your aspirations. The first point is the point of time. There's a time, motivation, the antidote, and the field, the object. These are the 4 key points that we need to know. Usually with every practice, even the practice of taking refuge, there's key points. You know all the teachings about refuge, but what are the key points? That's what you always need to seek out. Then your practice will hit the ground. So time, the key point of time means to train and continually practicing, train that virtue becomes uninterrupted. Like don't allow it to go on pause or become, you just forget virtue, but always be looking, thinking, speaking, doing something that your mind, your introspection and mindfulness are alert to the presence of virtue. Then motivation to have this, we need, in order to practice, we need to have passion. We need to be passionate about practice, about virtue, about bodhicitta. We need to have determination in that way. So again, reflect on and contemplate the teachings here, the first chapter, and accumulate the merit and of the second and third chapters, and then begin practicing virtue throughout your daily life by implementing mindfulness, carefulness, and introspection, so that it becomes uninterrupted and you develop kind of a passion for it, a determination. Determination means, I'll do this. Push through. Motivation. See, this is motivation to connect with compassion and loving kindness. So our practice may be, I should practice compassion, loving kindness. Then you're either practicing it or not practicing it. So here, the motivation is the power behind connecting with it, which is that strong determination. So when you, like we said, I think before, when you go to bed at night, make a determination about what your first thought in the morning will be. When you go to bed at night, make a determination that your practice will occur in your dreams. It's the same mind that's awake. It's the same mind that's asleep. So determination is very important key point of practice. Then the antidote, apply the antidote. So we have to then also be aware of the antidote to our afflictions. Like it says in the first turning of the wheel, the Shakyamuni's teachings on the right speech, speaking about right speech, but it applies to the right actions and right actions, which are actions in addition to speech or beyond speech. The difficulties of right speech, for instance, it's difficult to recognize the arising of negative intentions that give rise to negative speech. That's the first difficulty. When they do arise, then it's difficult to apply the antidote to them. And when you do apply the antidote, then the difficulty is in not difficult. It's difficult to that they come back again. That difficulty is difficult to continue. So here, again, basically, this is to recognize or to know what to apply when certain afflictions arise. For instance, here we're practicing the 6 perfections that are antidotes. They are the remedy to apply against the kleshas, against the afflictions. We could maybe say the 6 afflictions, although there's many, but you study and reflect on these, and then you'll see all the permutations of these basic afflictions. For instance, miserliness. Miserliness is the remedy for it is generosity. So when you go out with a group and the check comes, you just pretend that you're going for your wallet, and you look around hoping that somebody else finds their wallet before you do. That's called being miserly. Then discipline, the second paramita of discipline, is the antidote to negative actions. So you take vows, you take precepts in the discipline, and it's through adhering to those precepts that you defeat, that you antidote negative actions, that those precepts are enforce avoidance of those. So discipline is the antidote to being attracted to negative actions. So here we have like these teachings here on say speech. So if we reflect on those and want to implement those, then we'll run up against our negative mind that wants us to say something negative in this or that circumstance, to this or that person, or this or that animal. So if you strengthen your discipline, then your attachment to negative acts diminishes. It's antidoted by your adherence to the paramita of discipline. Patience antidotes anger. Patience is a mind, like I said, patience is a mind free of anger and endowed with the qualities of compassion and wisdom. So practicing, training in patience is to acquire those qualities of being free of anger. And then diligence, the fifth paramita, antidotes laziness. And diligence itself is a joy. It's the expression of a joyful enthusiasm in practicing virtue. Joy in virtue. Diligence is that. So it antidotes ho-hum. It antidotes lethargy and depression and self-denigration, torpor, all these other kind of useless things. So diligence. Then what's next is meditation or concentration, training in meditation, or let's say concentration. Antidotes mind's tendency to become agitated or drowsy. Through training and concentration, then mind can focus on virtue without becoming agitated stirred up, wild, or drowsy. And then, of course, the sixth paramita is the paramita of prajna, of sublime knowing, which is the antidote to ignorance. It's the discovery of, or the awakening to, what was referred to earlier as this secret of the mind, the wisdom quality, the wisdom of emptiness, or the wisdom of non-self. So this is the key point of the antidote. So it's important to know these so that we can recognize through introspection. Then mindfulness will pull up the antidote to apply. The introspection is alert to the affliction arising. Then mindfulness remembers what to do. So they're a team, sort of embraced by the carefulness or heedfulness. Okay, we should move on. Two more. Acting thus with faith and understanding, you should always undertake good works, and in whatever actions you perform, you should not be dependent on another. Okay, so we should clarify here. Acting with faith means, particularly, there's this Yichegi Depa means like confident faith, faith that came through your own effort, your own thinking process, your understanding of karma, for instance. The more we understand karma, then the more we develop this confident faith. And then we need to have that, and we need to have understanding. We need to know how to practice. Like we need to know what, say, the six paramitas are, and we need to understand what they are. Both the words, we need the words so that we can hook them, and then we need to know the meaning so that the meaning comes with them, and then we can practice. And you should always undertake good works, that is to say, through confident faith and understanding, this kind of understanding, then we engage in the conduct of the Bodhisattva. And whatever actions you perform, whatever practice you're doing, whatever of these paramitas you are engaging in, with aspiration bodhicitta as a framework, and engaging bodhicitta as the conduct itself, then you shouldn't depend on others. In other words, you should do virtue yourself, not ask others to do it for you, and not expect others to do virtue instead of you doing virtue. You jump into the water and pull that drowning child out. Don't expect somebody else to do it. Like that idea. Or let someone else give this beggar money. That idea. And don't ask others to do it for you. And the Bodhisattva conduct, this is a point. This is a point. Even great Master Atisha, our great bodhicitta teacher, who brought these teachings to our lineage, created our lineage of these bodhicitta teachings. He had one of his practices was always he always was practicing virtue. He was a perfect practitioner of the way of the Bodhisattva, the Bodhicharyavatara. And one of his virtue practices was in making tsatsas. And tsatsas, these small little clay images. And that was how he cultivated compassion. Is one of his methods for cultivating compassion was to pound out these tsatsas with a heart of bodhicitta to create virtue. And his disciples, what did they say? They didn't scold him, but they said, "Oh, no, let us do that for you. You're a great master. You shouldn't be getting your hands all muddy and dirty like that. Let us do it." And his answer was something like, "Should I also let you eat for me?" So we should practice virtue or conduct ourselves, not have others do it for us. If we're not able to do something, then it's perfectly reasonable then to ask someone else to. If someone's going to meet some lama that you would like to make an offering to, and you're prevented from going to your own circumstances, then you can give. Oh, please give this offering to Rinpoche. So those and then there's that. Of course, if we're not able to do it, then it's okay. But we should practice using our own strength and our own joyful diligence, our own joyful motivation. Sometimes, depending on another here, also refers to that when we are in a Dharma community or we go to a group practice, then we practice, but when we're by ourselves, we don't. That's what this also, we need to not be dependent on circumstances. As beginners, granted, we do need supporting, contributing circumstances. But we should try to not be the kind of a practitioner that abandons their practice just because the discipline of a group practice or being in the presence of a master or being in a dharma, living by a stupa or something like that, that when we leave, then we're just adrift. Don't be that way. And then 83, the perfections, giving and the rest, progress in sequence, growing in importance. The great should never be abandoned for the less, and others' good should be regarded as supreme. Okay, so this, so the perfections here refers directly to the paramitas, the 6 paramitas, the 6 transcendent conducts of a bodhisattva. Giving and the rest, meaning it starts with generosity and so forth, as we just mentioned. They progress, or they can be presented in 3 ways. One is progressive in sequence. That is the latter is based on the former. Discipline is based on generosity. Patience is based on discipline. Diligence is based on patience. Meditative concentration is based on diligence. Wisdom is based on meditative concentration. So that means that the sequence is progressive. Each one depends on the previous. which is also to say that generosity is the basis for discipline, and discipline is the basis for patience, and so on. And then another way that is to understand it is that they grow in importance. There's an importance attached to the paramitas, and that discipline is more important. Here we could say that the latter is higher than the former. Yeah, the latter is higher than the former. Higher meaning more virtuous, more merit. So that so discipline then is more important than generosity, and patience is more important than discipline. Important meaning in its importance, in its kind of excellence, and so on. And then the third way is that each one relates that each one, like a discipline, is more refined than generosity, and patience is more refined than discipline, and diligence is more refined than patience, and meditative concentration is more refined than diligence, and prajna, the wisdom, is more refined than meditative concentration. Meaning, by refined means that it's closer to reality, closer to the natural state, closer to the absolute truth. That's what that means there. So there's three ways, and you can also in the general discussions of the paramitas in the commentaries, you can find many different categories of how the perfections can be understood. And then here he says, the great should never be abandoned for the less, meaning that you should never abandon, say, or that you don't abandon, say, discipline to practice generosity. Or you don't abandon patience to practice discipline and generosity. You don't abandon diligence to practice that. Each one is sort of outshines the previous one. You don't want to go down. You want to going up. Was the point is prajna. The point is to bring to perfection wisdom. So that's a and then of course he emphasizes this is the sort of the all-encompassing main point here of that verse is that others' good should be regarded as supreme. So now we're talking about making a judgment call, and in order, of course, to do that, we need to become familiar with reducing our afflictions. To make a judgment call of giving up, say, discipline, that it would be much better to practice generosity. That's a judgment call. So you need to have certainty of that because certain negative outcomes can be experienced by going in that direction. Oh, it's one monk, famous monk of Shakyamunis, and he was making alms, walking in the morning, and then every day his one house he went to, then the daughter of the household there just completely fell in love with him. Just it's a handsome monk, and she was just going crazy about him. And I talked to him, and he talked to the family and everything. This won't work. I'm a monk, I'm a disciple of Shakyamuni. And finally, she said, if you don't marry me, I'm going to kill myself. I'll hang myself. And so he meditated and he married her. So like that. So you have to be very clear-headed when you do practice on your own and kind of make up your own order of importance. Certainly in the path of a bodhisattva, you can get away with, and I mean get away with, we can get away with non-virtue because of bodhicitta. Like if somebody's hysterically running in and says that someone has a gun and they're going to shoot them, so then you hide them maybe under your chair or put them in the closet or something, and then somebody comes with a gun and saying, I'm going to kill the such and such, where did he come here, where is he? Then if you're a stickler for lying, you'll say, oh, he's in the closet or she's in the closet. From the bodhicitta point of view, you say, oh, they went that way for sure. I saw them running completely in the opposite direction down there. And even, of course, the great story of the Captain Blackheart, who was ferrying many bodhisattvas across, and his intention was to kill them all, to sink the boat and kill them all. And one bodhisattva had the clairvoyance to know that that was occurring in the mind of that captain, and so he killed the captain out of compassion for him, of what he understood, the karma of the negative karma of killing bodhisattvas. And it would have been so, he was so moved by compassion for the captain that he cut the flow of that ill intent by killing him. And so then that comes down as non-virtue that was actually virtuous, because it prevented suffering and the good of others, the diminishing of suffering for others, then whatever that takes. If your heart is pure, then that's what you need to do. Okay. So with that, we will now end.